What's going on, everybody? Patrick Connor here, and welcome to the Knuckles and Gloves podcast. Big fights this weekend, big podcast episode with my big homie Aris Pina. What's up, bro? How you doing?
Everything's going good, man. Indeed, we have a big fight this weekend. Not sure that the public actually initially wanted it, but here we are.
It's definitely gone through a few different stages, dude. It's kind of crazy. Like the reaction to the fight that is, because I think that you're 100% right. I'm not gonna lie. I don't, I don't care who's doing what. This is not a fight necessarily anybody really was asking for. It had been asked about, like both fighters had been asked about this fight in the last few years, especially with Terence Crawford moving and displaying dominance at welterweight. It seemed like, okay, welterweight to middleweight when Canelo was still there, that's not really that far a leap, et cetera, et cetera. But even so, they both kind of dismissed it and were like, nah, we're not really looking to do that. Canelo, especially, he was like, why would I do that? That doesn't make any sense. From Terence Crawford's perspective, of course. But now that we've kind of gone through the motions, and I think that there have been some discussions and blah, 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 it's gone from what and why to okay, all right. And so, I mean, not everybody loves it, not going to lie, but I think we've gotten a little bit different perspective.
I mean, absolutely. Like Crawford, I mean, look, you're looking at two of the best fighters on the planet right now. Have they both slowed down a little bit? Sure. Crawford is now, what, 38 or so? And he's been around a long while. Canelo has been around even longer than him. Yeah, Canelo is younger than him. But ring-wise, I'm not sure of that because Canelo has been a professional since he was, what, fucking 16 or so? Like, he's been,
Yeah, he turned pro at either 15 or 16. And I mean,
yeah, like,
for several years, he was very active.
Oh, extremely. And when I was doing an interview yesterday about this fight, I was going through his record and I was surprised at some of the names that I was seeing on it that I totally forgot about because it's been a long time since I
Miguel
looked.
Vasquez.
Yeah, early on. He fought Vasquez twice, in fact. He fought him in Vasquez's first pro fight, and
Yeah,
then
I
he
totally
fought
forgot
him.
about that shit.
Yeah, and he fought him again when Vasquez was like 20 and 2 and clearly seasoned and being a pain in the ass to everybody. So, Larry Mosley, remember that name? The guy that was initially pegged in to be one of the favorites for the 2000 Olympic team and then, got upset. And guys like that, like he was fighting, well-rounded Leonardo Tyner, well-rounded fighters. And it's been a long time. It's been a long time he's been around too. So these are guys, though, to their credit, even though they're both a little bit past it, not at their absolute peak, but I mean, they're still high level, and they're still in the top five pound for pound. I mean, Crawford is. I'm not sure about Canelo at this moment, but that being said, like you said, it's kind of like one of those fights that initially everyone's like, "What the fuck?" But now that it's here, it's fight week. It's still, the buzz that we might have anticipated for a fight of this level might not be there, but still, it's been. I think people are getting excited for it because it is. It's kind of it's a fascinating clash of styles.
I'm definitely open to the discussion of why the buzz doesn't seem to be as much as it should be or whatever. I'm like I said, I'm open to discussing it, of course, but I think that one of the things that is hurting or in that regard that doesn't help is that there isn't really a unified force. Like, for instance, there's not an HBO pay per view or a Showtime pay per view or even necessarily a DAZN pay per view. And that's not even to knock anybody who's handling this. The entire landscape of boxing and the way that fights are being promoted and pushed and carried in terms of, being aired completely different. And that's not to shut down the discussion. That's just to say that I'm not entirely sure how you navigate that in today's world with a fight like this that might take a little bit of stretching to get people to kind of convince them that it's worthwhile. But I mean, I don't really see any issue with it, like the fight itself at this point. It's I think that maybe it's just that I've convinced myself. It's that's entirely possible, but we're definitely seeing, and I said this when I wrote an article kind of opening up the coverage for the ring on their website, And one of the things that I said, and I stand by, because I think it's 100% factual, is that it's just not that often that you have two fighters who are like two of the top fighters in the world, two of the best pound for pound fighters in the world. And they're not only close enough in weight that they could actually fight, but they're close enough to their primes that the fight isn't a total piece of shit. That it's not just like, whoa, what the fuck is this? It's not Mayweather Pacquiao where like they weren't complete dusty bastards during that fight, but they were far enough from their primes and far enough from when the fight should have been made that they're a large chunk of the boxing world was kind of like it was obviously captivating overall and made gobs of fucking money as it should have, but not to the degree had it happened in like 2010 or 2011. And had that been the case, that would have been just fucking bonkers. But that being said, in terms of prime, Crawford's far closer to his prime as we've seen recently. Canelo's far closer to his prime as we've seen recently, comparatively. And so I think that in that regard, it is a rare fight. It is a super fight, massive fight. And so we just have to get down to like, is it an intriguing fight? Is it a fight where it's going to be a total fucking wash? And what I think the initial thought of many people is that Canelo's just too big, too powerful. It's going to walk through Crawford. Crawford's not going to be able to do anything about it. And so, is that the case? I think that's really the question that, really needs to be answered or that we should tackle or discuss or whatever.
Yeah, and that's been the main gripe for a lot of people is that like, oh, Crawford should be in Rano's division and Canelo should be fighting David Benavidez. And I absolutely agree with the Benavidez point because that is a fight,
Yeah, I mean, can you,
you
you know what I
know.
mean? Like at this point, anybody who's disagreeing is just like a Canelo fan or something.
Yeah, seriously, trying to come up with excuses why Benavidez doesn't deserve that fight when he's been the top challenger in Canelo's division for a number of years. And the way that things have been going down, it almost seems like Canelo has avoided him a little bit. Like, I don't think he's scared of Benavidez, but like, he's not going out of his way to fight him either. You know what I mean? Because at this point in time, Benavidez' style would be all a nightmare to Canelo, who is a guy that kind of like likes to lean back and pick his shots and, do things like that and keep his own pace. And he's usually able because he's such a great fighter and knows how to command the ring, he's usually able to make anyone he fights fight at his own pace within a round or two, make him do what he wants. And I think he realizes he wouldn't be able to do that with Benavidez. Not to say that Benavidez was outright beat him and just knocked the shit out of him, but like Canelo just knows it would be a very rough night. You know what I mean? And the fact that like a guy like Crawford, who presents a whole different list of problems, but at the same time is not as physically big as a guy like Benavidez is, who will, tower over Canelo. It seems like a bigger, a better proposition. That and the money that it commands is even bigger, more so than what a Benavidez fight would bring.
I don't know what they're being paid for this fight. I also don't really care. Like I'm not I'm not really into that, so I don't really give a shit. However, I can guarantee that's a lot of money. So, and that's not to excuse a Benavidez fight not happening. I've discussed this before. We've talked about it on previous shows, usually like when it comes to previewing or post, wherever recapping other Canelo fights. But I mean, Canelo's petty, dude. Canelo is a salty ass dude. And I mean, part of me understands why. Um, I get, well, I guess it's not so much an issue of understanding, it's just whether or not I agree. I understand. The dude's probably had to deal with bullies and being picked on and being, the butt of like snide remarks and shit like that for much of his life for obvious reasons. He's a redheaded Mexican dude, and that they're not nearly as rare as people might think, but they're also not super common. And so it's the kind of thing where it's like if you're like super short, maybe, and you got to learn how to fucking defend yourself because you're always getting picked on. It's kind of like that. And I think that for much of his life, he's kind of felt like he's up against it. And so he has that kind of chip on his shoulder naturally in the first place. And then on top of that, I think he's demonstrated during his boxing career that if you like snipe at him, if you pick at him, poke at him, if you talk shit, if you do anything to piss him off, he like will not think twice about just being like, fuck you, and I'm not going to make you money. I'm not going to pay you. Like, that's it. And so I'm not excusing it, and I've also said that before, not excusing the Benavidez fight not happening. But from Canelo's perspective, I think that what he sees is like, oh, there's this guy who probably does deserve this fight, but him and his dad are like the most shit talking fucking jerks, and I'm not fucking gonna give them an opportunity. Just like the same type of thing where he was like, I'm not dealing with what's his name? My God, dude, he's been so pushed so far out of my mind I can't even think of his fucking name right now. But homeboy who held the WBO middleweight title forever, your homeboy from fucking the Cape Verdean dude. Fuck.
Oh, Boo Boo.
Yeah, Boo Boo
Yeah, yeah.
Andrade. My God, dude. Yeah, when he ran up on Canelo and he was just like, "You fight with nobody." You
Yeah,
know, he
yeah,
was
yeah.
after that, he was just like, "Oh, you're gonna fucking ruin my shit. Now I'm gonna pretend like you never existed, dude. Like if you were ever close to getting the shot before, you're never getting it now." Because he's just a salty fucking guy like that.
He
And
was
I'm
even
not,
more salty than Sugar Ray Leonard at that point too. Like Leonard
yeah,
would be
right or
an asshole.
wrong, that's
Well,
just who he is.
I don't know if he was more salty than Leonard. I'm not sure if Canelo would hold a fucking press conference and invite his chief rival over there just to like tell him I'm actually retired. But
Yeah, he's lucky he made it away alive from that press conference, dude. The look on Hagler's face where he was like,
Yeah, all right. So I take that back. I don't think Canelo's been that salty because I don't think anyone in history could be that much of an asshole that Leonard was that night. My
yeah,
God.
imagine if Canelo held a press conference and Benavidez like Benavidez and we're gonna
And he
announce, and
invites
then he was just like,
Yeah, that
I
would be the
retire.
equivalent of like inviting Benavides there and being, thinking that he's finally going to make the announcement and being like, actually, I'm just retiring. Sorry, buddy. He probably
Wow.
should. I think that would be hilarious. Someone needs to do that
I'm
today.
not gonna lie, I'd laugh a lot if I'd feel really bad for Benavidez, but that would be one of the funniest things to ever
Like Eddie did
happen.
that to Triple G or something like that. Like, I don't know. That would definitely be funny.
But similarly, I think that that's also a perfect example, dude. The whole Triple G situation, where he intentionally made Triple G wait, and a big part of that was because, from his perspective, Golovkin started talking shit,
Yeah.
and he was just like, "Fine, then I'll fucking make you wait," and which just pissed everybody off. But again, when you're that salty, like that just fuels you. People, fuck this guy. Hmm, okay. So
So,
like he just made money in the meanwhile.
but Canelo's also that point in his career too, where he can pick and choose whatever he wants. Not many people in boxing get to that level where they can pick and choose their course of their career, who they want to fight. Belts really don't matter at that point. Because I mean, at a certain level too, it's almost like you can't get stripped if you're such a high level guy. Like the last mandatory Canelo really made was against what Yildirim, whatever the fuck his name is. You
Yeah,
know, what I'm talking
Yildirim.
about. Yeah.
I guess probably that sounds about right. I have no
And
idea.
I mean, everybody knew that fight was a gimme, absolutely. But it was like that's the last time he actually, I think, went about with the sanctioning bodies type deal. I mean, there's always, he can pick and choose with these big fights, and at that point too, you're kind of in control of them. Like Floyd was always in the control of the WBC and what he wanted to do, and others kind of have that thing. Not even a guy like Inoue really has that type of juice yet, even though he's considered one of the top three best on the planet. So yeah, when Canelo's offered, and the thing is, he's still picking fights. Like, I mean, he's going through the motions, finding guys like Berlanga and the last one, and Skull, which was absolutely horrendous to watch,
Yeah, it was not
and
good.
things like that. But um, he finds a way where he's fighting a guy who's not as big, but at the same time presents, an extreme amount of challenges because he's one of the best of the generation along with him. And so he finds this as a way to challenge himself, but at the same time, not being, fighting a guy that's going to be as physically taxing as a person like Benavidez, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? Like the size difference that a lot of people brought up in this fight, I mean, it's there, but it's not as sizable, I think, as people want to make it out to be. Like Alvarez gradually grew into where he was. And I mean, he's always kind of been like a because when he turned pro, was he around like a junior
Yeah,
welterweight or
he's
lightweight junior
not a
welter?
big super middleweight, at least not in terms of frame. He's
That's
not a
what I
big
always
super
thought too.
middleweight.
Like, as he was moving up, I always saw him to be like a welterweight junior middleweight. I mean, granted, he was still really young and filling out at that point too, but like, yeah, he's not really a big super middleweight because a lot of super middleweights you can see would be able to compete as light heavyweights. Like Roy did, for instance. Roy wasn't a big light heavyweight, but he didn't look unnatural at that weight either. Like Canelo, in my opinion, looked unnatural at that weight. when he fought Kovalev and when he subsequently fought Bivol. He just looked too small for that, like a person just pushing himself a little bit too much, you know? I mean, obviously he's competitive at that weight and like more than competitive, but it just wasn't suiting him well. And so super middleweight where he is at is probably where he needs to stay for the rest of his career at this point. But, Crawford, for that matter, has been the majority of his career has been around like lightweight, junior welterweight, and welterweight. In fact, Crawford was still a lightweight. While Crawford was still a lightweight, I believe junior welterweight around there, Canelo had already fought more than like 9 times above 150 pounds. And so I think that's where the gripe comes along because Canelo has already been fighting for so long at a higher weight that Crawford is just recently starting moving up. You know what I mean? Like I think his first fight was at 154. Was his last fight was that first time, right?
So let's look real quick. Canelo was at like 140, 147 and when he first started as a pro.
Okay.
And I mean, just to kind of like give you a brief comparison, like they're pretty close in age actually, but Crawford was still an amateur at that point and was a featherweight.
There you go. Yeah.
I mean, they are clearly different in size, but I think what you started off saying is really the key is that the difference is not
It's
really
not
what it's being
a
made out to
huge
be.
one, no, because Crawford, you can tell too physically, like it took a little bit longer for him to move up. But I always felt like he was forcing himself to stay at the division instead of allowing himself to be what he wanted. Like I always think like for me, when I saw him at the Hall of Fame, he looks like he walked around naturally around 160 or a little bit higher than that. And not to say he was draining himself because he never looked like he was like completely depleted or anything like that. But he looked like a lot of lightweights back then when you would see him on the scale. Like he was ripped, but he also just looked like skinny, like a guy that should be putting on a little bit more weight instead of just trying to make 135. And then as he's moved up, like I felt like especially at 140, around like 140, 147. I mean, he was absolutely brilliant. And people were just like, oh, well, if he's been around 140 most of his career, 147. I think he was hanging around there more so. I think he would have moved up quicker if it wasn't for one, his obsession to like become unified champions in each division, which that's on him. Not a lot of people move up quickly. Okay, I want a belt. I'm gonna make this title defense or two, and then I'm just gonna move up immediately. Like he wanted to actually like dominate the division, and then two, he had that carrot of Manny Pacquiao being dangled in his face for like what, almost a decade, and he just never had it. And like various points, that was his whole obsession too. And I get that because Pacquiao was the end game for him. He had that massive amounts of money he could have made off of that fight. And it was always like that golden ticket that was dangled, but at the same time being pulled away. And every time you think, okay, I'm going to get it now. Yeah, yeah, this time you'll get it. And then for whatever reason, it doesn't happen. And I don't want to say it was completely, it definitely wasn't completely on Pacquiao's end. Like, I'm sure if they told him, yo, you got to fight Crawford, he would have done it. Pacquiao's never ducked anybody, but he wasn't going out of his way to fight Crawford either. He was looking for bigger fights, and Crawford didn't have the name at that time. You know what I mean? The hardcore fans loved him, and the sport in general respected him, but he didn't have that name that's going to make the public be like, yo, I need to fight this man. And so you have that, and then also too, just like his ongoing battles within Top Rank. Crawford, I kind of compare a little bit personality wise to Larry Holmes, if you think about it a little bit, right? Like Crawford is the type of guy that like, he's not a mean person. Neither was Holmes for that
Yeah.
matter, but they definitely carry a chip on their shoulder. They feel like, as Holmes did, Crawford felt like he deserved a lot more credit than what he was getting and a lot more publicity and, bigger fights. And they're always chasing for that. And they're always, kind of fighting against like their promoters and other various things over there because they're trying to get their just due. So
And fighting in the shadow of bigger stars too.
exactly, exactly. That's the big one right there, hanging in the shadows of bigger stars. So they're always a little bit bitter. You know what I mean? Like Crawford would win these fights and all that, but you can always feel that he wasn't quite satisfied until what he wanted, like that fight with, Pacquiao, which Holmes got his fight with Ali, even though it became an utter disaster, regarding it. But like still, he needed something like that to solidify himself to be like, I'm the man now, and Crawford was trying to find that. And Aram was looks seemed to be like the one that was always just kind of like holding him back a little bit, and then you would just see like the inner turmoil between the both of them because Crawford is seeking these major fights, and even though he's collecting belts, he's doing it against guys like Julius and Dongo, and then he's forced to fight on like small level ESPN pay-per-views against a damaged Kell Brook, a damaged Amir Khan. Like these were guys that had already seen better days at that point, you know. Jeff Warren, who had beaten Pacquiao, but I mean, still like wasn't gonna like do your thing for him. And then from there, he's like, being forced to fight guys like Mean Machine, who gave him a really hell of a fight, or Benavidez' younger brother there, or older brother, excuse me, Jose.
Yeah, and I'm maybe biased. I don't know. Whatever, regardless of my bias or not, the way that I view it, especially if you compare it to somebody like Floyd Mayweather, and I'm certainly not saying that Terence Crawford is Floyd Mayweather per se. I'm simply saying that in terms of their situation, you look Floyd Mayweather earlier on in his career, even though the language that he used and the way that he went about it was pretty stupid, calling a contract that's very favorable to him overall and better than the vast majority of contracts that fighters his age ever got, regardless of if they went to the Olympics or not. Calling that a slave contract is, not a very good way to endear yourself to your promoter. However, he also said a lot of other things apart from that. And a lot of people focus down on that probably a little too much. For instance, in interviews around that time, he also said, look, dude, I'm a better talent than this. A lot of these other guys who were also in the Olympics with me have been pushed farther and harder than I have been invested in more. Other promotional companies have really gotten these guys opportunities. And, I've gotten a world title, but where's my big money opportunities? I'm happy for the contract, but this is not the contract that like that I deserve. And look, he was right. I mean, you could say whatever. He's a dick. He's as a person, not a good guy. A lot of things that he's done as Floyd Mayweather and not as the fighter, I don't like, and I don't think he's a great person. But he was correct. He deserved bigger opportunities. He was the talent that he said he was. And then if you fast forward and look at Terence Crawford, he deserved bigger opportunities. He was as good as he said he was back then. He deserved to be pushed better. He deserved to be invested in more. And neither of them deserved to have their promoter turn around to media and basically hamstring them and say, no, 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 this is too tough. I'm having such a tough time promoting Floyd Mayweather. Look at him. He hangs around too many gangsters. His dad's a bad guy. His uncle's a bad guy too, and I can't get him away from them. And that's what Aram said at the time. And so I don't really want to deal with it and blah blah blah. And as soon as they could cut loose from each other and have it not be super acrimonious, it happened. And then fucking, kind of similarly with Terence Crawford, except for Terence Crawford had to wait it out even more and was even kind of forced into even more obscurity than Floyd Mayweather was. Is you just said it, having to fight these, fighters that either were a little bit past it, weren't up to snuff, or nobody fucking knew. And it turned out, especially at welterweight, and when he got his big moment against Errol Spence, he proved that he did deserve those opportunities all along, that he should have been pushed, and it probably was a little bit later than it should have been. However, he also finds himself now at the doorstep of a massive money fight and a big opportunity to cement a legacy that like this is something that, and I'm again not saying that Terence Crawford is as good as or equating him to Floyd Mayweather, but Floyd Mayweather never did this and never thought about doing this. When he did have the opportunity and Gennady Golovkin was like, "What's up? You want to step on up another weight class?" Floyd Mayweather was like, "No." So I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like, just saying, dude. Like, it's not to say that if it does wind up a good thing for Terence Crawford, that doesn't make him better than Floyd Mayweather. He still doesn't quite, come close to touching that overall legacy, but still, it's extremely admirable. And whether or not he rates with him or above him or anything, a lot of people aren't going to give a shit about that. They're going to give a shit about the fact that he stepped up. They're going to give a shit about the fact that Terence Crawford, even though the weight difference might not be as big as many think, like we're saying, it's still significant. It still would be a very significant a very significant victory if he managed to, dude, think about if he managed to actually stop Canelo.
That would be
Fuck,
ins
dude.
I doubt that's going to happen
Oh
because
yeah, that would be an extremely low probability. Somebody would cash out like a motherfucker on that. But imagine if he did though,
it would be huge. It would
and
be
what that could
absolutely
mean to
huge.
his legacy. Yikes.
And
We'd have to have a discussion.
and it wasn't until like he jumped into the mainstream of like everybody and until 2023 when he fought Errol Spence. It was like until then though, yeah, it's like kind of sad. I'm looking at his box rec right now. 2019 was the last time he had more than one fight in a year. That's not good for anybody especially when you're one of the high level guys out there. And that's again, that's because of the promotional shit that he was going through trying to seek these big fights and then kind of being force fed something else. But it's like he fights Kell Brook. He stopped him in what was it, 3 rounds. And then he fought Sean Porter in 2021. And that was a hell of a fight. And that was like his first like big one too, where he was like, okay, I'm gonna get one of these people. Because the other thing too was that not only was he like chasing the Pacquiao fight, the other issue was that he was with Bob Arum, and all of the top welterweights at the time were with PBC. And Arum and PBC got along about as well as Arum and Don King did in the 80s, which is not at all. They weren't really doing business with each other. On occasion, they did here and there when the money was up there. But I mean, like when it came to Terence Crawford, no, and all the PBC guys who were getting paid extreme amounts of money are saying, why would I fight Crawford? There's no reason to. Everybody, I can fight this guy or that one. And, that's why you would see Danny Garcia get recycled over and over, or Keith Thurman, or this one or that one, stuff like that. And so after he finally gets out of the strains of Arum, and then there was that whole fiasco of where was he going to fight next. At one point they thought he was going to go to PBC and then he was going to do this, and then he ends up fighting David Avanesian, who was just a contender, but another guy's going to bring you anything on what was that, Black Prime?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then
Bit of a fiasco. And then the glove fiasco, because
oh yeah, I remember
Everlast
that
is
the
just
Everlast
flipping
glove
like a
fiasco. This shit
motherfucker.
just split in half right during the fight. It was really bad. Both of them did, didn't they?
Both gloves. Yeah,
Yeah.
both gloves. Because Everlast is fucking trash bags. However, moving beyond that, it's fucking dude. He's had a weird trajectory in the last few years. However, his patience has paid off.
Yeah.
I mean, at least monetarily, has it paid off in the sense that like there are going to be a lot of history centric folks. I don't think you and I really take this position necessarily. Like there are a lot of people who are like history fans who are just like, oh, these fighters today are total fucking pussies. They don't fight enough. I mean, would I like them to fight more? Yeah, I would prefer them to because I want to see them in the ring more.
Of
But
course.
also I'm aware now, and at least I have greater awareness now of CTE and the damage that they take. So like, if possible, would it be better to just see them, jam a better career into a more condensed, that would be better, really. Like maybe what like Naoya Inoue is doing, like where he's just fucking like a tackling fucking everybody as much as he can, and then he's gonna get out, hopefully. That would be great. But I am also aware that's not usually how it goes. I would love fighters to fight more, but I mean that's just kind of that's how it is. However, it also it also means kind of like when you were saying earlier, a guy like Canelo who really is in control of his own destiny. There's a double-edged sword to that, and there's also the double-edged sword to a fighter only fighting like once a year. The double-edged sword to being in control of your own destiny means that like, that shit's on you. Like if you're not fighting who you're supposed to be fighting, like a David Benavidez, that shit's on you because you could make that fight at any time.
Yeah.
Anytime. If Canelo said that fight's next, that fight's going to happen next. Benavidez is not going to turn that fight down. I refuse to fucking believe that. And then, similarly, or swinging back to Terence Crawford, the real double-edged sword in terms of fighting less often and kind of hopefully getting a more condensed career in is that if that one fight a year isn't a tremendous fight or a really worthwhile fight, you're just kind of wasting time. You're wasting your legacy. And anyway, it leaves us in a position where we're not entirely sure what Terence Crawford is going to bring into the ring overall. And he's also at an age where there is that possibility of a fighter just kind of falling off overnight. For that matter, Canelo too. He's been fighting since he's 15. He's 35 now. He's been fighting for fucking 20 years as a pro. More years as a pro than he did not fight as a pro. So that's pretty fucking crazy. There's a possibility that he could dude, I saw some fucking photos. Who knows if it was real? Who knows what's what? But there was some photos of him with one of those rib protectors on and sparring and shit like that. And people are going, "Oh, he's got a rib injury from sparring with boots and all this type of shit." Who knows? I really don't know, and I'm not pretending like I do. But it does kind of make me wonder. Fuck, bro. I mean, I'm older than that now, but even when I was 35, I'm like stretching. I get like a fucking weird cramp, and I'm like, taken out of commission for 3 days and shit. So, I mean, who knows, man? There are a lot of X factors and a lot of kind of weird possibilities and stuff like that because of those things, because of their age and potential wear and tear, blah, blah, blah. But that also adds some intrigue to this. One other thing that I wanted to say before I let you loose on this shit real quick is that you mentioned earlier the idea of Terence Crawford and kind of his move up in weight and stuff like that. I mean, and this is just one of those things that I feel like I've kind of like talked myself into giving Terence Crawford maybe more of a chance than he should have, but nonetheless, you know, I'm pretty sure you're fairly aware of this too, being a big wrestling fan. But Terence Crawford started out in wrestling. Like that was his first sport focus. I know he played like basketball. I think he said he played baseball, but that his first kind of like sport focus was wrestling. And he got into wrestling and was doing really well in wrestling before getting into boxing. But that when it comes to wrestling, and we're not talking about pro wrestling here, that's a different fucking thing entirely. But like collegiate wrestling, amateur wrestling, making weight for wrestling is on like a totally different fucking level when it comes to cutting weight, dude. Like people don't understand. And that's why when a lot of people watch UFC or watch MMA and they see a lot of like, especially the ex wrestlers cutting weight and they look like they're dying. I mean, they probably kind of are, but nonetheless, they've done that shit since they were like 11. Like, and I'm not even joking either. And again, not trying to make excuses or talk myself into believing anything, but I have no doubt that Terence Crawford has known how to cut weight since he was a fucking younger lad. You know what I'm saying? So I also have very little doubt that he probably was holding back. And that's not to say that he's a natural super middleweight. I'm not saying that either. But he doesn't have to fucking weigh in at 168, number one. He could come in weighing at 160, fucking 159, or whatever that fucking, the buffer is or whatever between the divisions. He could come in weighing fairly light, number one. And, number two, I think that a lot of that is just going to be him not cutting weight. He's just, it's not going to be him, looking fantastic or super cut necessarily. It's just going to be him not cutting that extra weight to get to 147 or 154 or whatever. So I don't think it'll be necessarily as drastic for that reason, like you were kind of saying. So anyway, I don't know, man. I think there are far more people picking Crawford or leaning toward Crawford than I kind of was initially expecting. But what are you thinking here?
It's tough, I don't. I've been thinking about it a lot. Initially, I was like going with people and like, Canelo probably can beat him, but Crawford is a different animal than like other Canelo opponents. You know what I mean? Especially ones that become just kind of complacent and follow along with what he wants to do. And it's like I can't see him, for instance, turning into what Charlo did, right? Like Charlo got hit with a counter early on, got dropped, and then just became kind of discouraged after that, or whatever was going on in his head, and he just fought a very defensive fight after that. I've never been high on either Charlo to begin with, not even though they both had tremendous success and, proven themselves in the ring. I've seen them both get outboxed, like, before they'd be able to turn fights around with one punch power and all that. So I wasn't just like, oh my God, look what Canelo did to him. Um, a guy like Crawford, I feel might be the most complete fighter. I'm talking about overall ability and just the way they think in the ring and all this other shit since Floyd. Canelo's best opponent since Floyd. And I don't want people being like, oh, it's a knock on Triple G and anything. No, I think Triple G is an absolute brilliant fighter himself. I just think Crawford has even more of a better mind than Triple G does. And we've seen now that like Crawford, especially in the Spence fight, when he's like pushed and like to that level where he he's been clamoring for these type of fights for so long that if he can put himself to the level of what he did with Spence, I mean, who knows? He looked unbeatable that night. I mean, Spence obviously too didn't come in at 1,000%, but because of the car accident and other shit, that's happened to him. But that being said, no one else was going to do that to Spence that night. Like he was just completely fucking throttled. That was a beatdown akin to watching. It was akin to watching like Sanchez Gomez, for instance, where I mean, Gomez had more moments than Spence did in the fight, but like
Yeah.
kind of the same, similar, just like
Yeah,
beatdown.
but
Like
just
from the very beginning, you just saw like one guy dominating the other, and you're like, all right, well, here it is. And I don't think he's gonna have that same thing with Canelo. I mean, his last fight against Madrimov, that was interesting in itself too. I mean, Madrimov is a different type of fighter than Canelo. Like he's a switch
extremely true.
a very tricky switch hitter, like, and just an overall awful type of guy to fight. You can just tell it sucks to fight a guy like that. And even though he only had 10 pro fights, that doesn't matter. Excuse me. It doesn't really matter at that day and age, especially with some of these European fighters or, from the overseas fighters, because they've had the most ridiculous amateur careers you can imagine. So them having 10 pro fights and they're already turning pro and fighting high level guys, it's not like they're fighting just journeymen and cupcakes when they first turn pro. They're already ready for a guy like Crawford. And I mean, it was a close fight. Like, did Crawford pull it out? He did. I worked it too. Well, what was that, last year? So I don't remember a lot about it, but like, it was one of those fights that like Crawford
I
definitely
thought he
had.
won close. Yeah.
He had to think through. It wasn't easy for him. He got hit with some counters and all that, but he was able to like pull it out at the end. And a lot of people, after seeing that, oh, he's not ready for 154. Look how he looked against Madrimov, and look what who's the dude that fought Madrimov since then? Virgil Ortiz. Look what Ortiz did to Madrimov. What did Ortiz do to Madrimov? That was a close fight too. He pulled it out at the end, but Madrimov was giving him the business early on. I mean, like, what do you want? It's like these guys have tough fights sometimes. I mean, Canelo has not looked spectacular himself his past few fights. And that's the thing is that I think both these guys at this point, especially a guy like Canelo in his career, they need someone that's going to push them to that next level to give them motivation to try to do something. Like Canelo has not been motivated his past few fights. He certainly was not motivated for a guy like Berlanga. He wasn't motivated for a guy like Skull. Um, who did he fight before that? That he went, I don't know. The guy that he said he gave a good, he gave it a go, mate, John Ryder, shit like that,
Oh
you
yeah,
know.
John Ryder. Then there was the third Golovkin fight, which
Yeah,
was
and he just
a clearly faded version of Golovkin.
exactly. And Canelo, aside from, the Golovkin fight, I guess, where he was up for that one, he just has been going through the motions. And I mean, like, you can't, but the thing I'm not going to be like, oh man, I'm going to give him an excuse for that. Even if you're going through the motions, a guy like Berlanga had no business going the distance with him. I'm sorry. Like, Berlanga's a tough kid who has a good punch, but like, we saw what happened to him when he fought someone legitimately gunning Shiraz, and Shiraz just took him out. Like, he wasn't playing games, he just did that. And the Canelo of like 2014, 2015 would have done the same thing. Like, Berlanga wasn't going to last 4 rounds with that version of Canelo. The fact that he went 12 rounds and was able to win a round or two off of him did not look good on his end. The fact that a guy like John Ryder was able to go the distance and win a round or two off of him does not look good on his end. You know what I mean? And the fact that he had no inclination to actually like cut the ring off against Skull or do anything for that matter to, to try to break him down except follow him along and then land the odd body shot or headshot here and there while throwing 15 punches around did not look good. So he needs I think he realizes that like he's gonna have to put up a better effort for this fight and a much bigger effort because like Crawford is motivated. Crawford's coming. And a guy like Crawford, like since he couldn't get the Pacquiao fight, he took care of Spence. He feels like this is gonna be the one that's gonna like place him amongst the all-time greats. So I think I'm liking Crawford in this fight, to be honest, Pat. Like I've been thinking back and forth on it. I don't think the size difference is gonna be like insane because like we said earlier, Canelo is not a huge super middleweight. He's bigger than Crawford, He has a bigger frame than Crawford, but Crawford is not a small guy himself. By the pictures I've been seeing of him working out, he's looking absolutely shredded. He kind of reminds me of like, um, remember when Holyfield moved up and he had Mackie Shilstone with him back in the day? I'm not talking about the gas, all right, but I mean just like the same kind of like body build and all that. Like is it's being, he's going with the right people and it's not just like putting on weight just to put it on because there is some guys out there in the past in history who when they moved up in weight, they didn't do it correctly and it clearly showed. Like Michael Moore, for instance, when he moved up from light heavyweight to heavyweight. No, not at all. Like you can clearly see he was just hitting fast food and not giving a shit. And everyone that was around him basically said the same thing that was true. And then you also have um, Duran, for instance. You know what I mean? As he moved up, it clearly was showing that he wasn't watching what he was eating as he moved up. He was just kind of going where
Yeah, he
all
looks soft as shit, like
the
basically from 154 up. But he made it work though.
I mean, totally. Like great fighters can do what they can do regardless of their body sometimes. But like, Crawford looks like he's doing it the right way. And as you mentioned too, that he was a wrestler, and he's a very physically strong guy. Because I think a lot of people saying Canelo's physicality is what's going to get him and stuff like that. Canelo's not a really physical
Nah,
fighter,
nah.
And if anything, he's calmed down even more so. Like he was never Mr. Aggressive to begin with, and like really going out there and trying to blow someone away. If you forced it, he would go with you. Like I mean, look what he did to Kirkland. But he's always a guy that's kind of like content to lean back and like, if you're not going to push the pace, he's not going to either, especially now. And that's why guys like Berlanger and others have been able to last the distance because Canelo's just kind of like, well, I'm just going to lean back. Like, especially with Munguia. He even said so afterwards. I just let Munguia survive. And so it's like, I don't know. I just think that Crawford, even though the layoffs do worry me a little bit, and you got to think about layoffs too. If you're only fighting once a year, that's how injuries can accumulate because you're not really staying active. You're not going there. Things can just catch up to you, and you're not, like keeping your body in motion. And I know he had a shoulder surgery a few years ago, and you never know if that could flare up randomly, anything like that. But like, I just say with all the intangibles down there, I think Crawford still even has a better skill set than Canelo, and I think he can pull it off.
Dude, I think that you're pretty much on the right path, dude. And I personally can envision a fight where Canelo waits too much, tries to time those big counters, and Terence Crawford is too wise to it, uses movement, and I think what is going to be a surprisingly fast and hard jab
Yeah.
to really throw Canelo's rhythm off and be able to avoid those big counters. I mean, this really might come down to a situation where Canelo's going to need his jab far more than he's comfortable using it. And I really could envision a scenario where Canelo just waits far too much in this fight. The problem, of course, for Crawford is that he's going to have to be really on his shit
Yes.
because regardless of how small we believe the size difference to be, the punching power difference is going to be real. And once he gets in there, if he's having a tough time getting by Madrimov in terms of absorbing those punches, he might be on it in a slightly different world when it comes to Canelo. But of course, he's also going to be in a different world when it comes to speed. And that's why I hope that Crawford is not planning on weighing at 168. And I think that that would be a really big mistake because he's going to need that footwork and speed in order to get through this fight, in my opinion.
Mhm.
But I do think he can. I do think that it is possible that Terence Crawford can win a decision, and that's kind of what I think I'm going to go with. I do think that Canelo just never really sounded motivated to take this fight. When asked about it before, he was pretty dismissive of it and was just like, "That's not even on my radar." Like what he had talked about retiring before. I think he said he's going to retire at 37. Why, I don't know. But that's the age that he said for a while. Um, but I mean, he has spoken about it before. And also, I think that you were just talking about it and kind of his in his like previous form or whatever. And we're talking about like 2020, 2021, 2022, when he seemed nearly unstoppable and he'd unified the middleweight division. And it was like, where the fuck did this come from? You know what I'm saying? Especially because he seemed reluctant or whatever you want to call it, especially to get in with Golovkin. He seemed reluctant to even weigh in at 165 or 160 fucking pounds. You know, he essentially created his own division below middleweight, but was still forcing motherfuckers to fight for the middleweight title, you know? That is, which is whoo. But
Yeah.
you talked earlier about, you know, exercising his power over their alphabet organizations. There's your evidence right there. So it really was kind of a shock when he moved up to super middleweight and just started like laying waste. And we were like, where the fuck did this come from?
Yeah.
And so I think that that also probably gave him a feeling of you know, invincibility, and then running into Dmitry Bivol, who we of course now in hindsight have come to understand is a very very good light heavyweight, and might even, you know, if he continues on this path, might even be a Hall of Famer himself. Uh, so there's certainly no shame in losing to Bivol, but that was a really big, just kind of like bam, momentum fucking stopper for Canelo. And it almost feels like ever since then, he's really trying to kind of reclaim that type of feeling or momentum. And the fighters that he's gotten in with have just not, they haven't been the type of fighters he can get up for. They've been bad styles in terms of really giving him good fights or exciting fights, et cetera, or opportunities to close the show and all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, you know, I don't know where Canelo is in terms of career or where he's thinking. I can't imagine that he's got to be at a high point. I mean, so I think that it's an open door for Crawford really to seize this moment. And I just personally think that when I talked about earlier that Canelo's a spiteful guy, so's Crawford.
Mhm.
Crawford's the kind of fighter where you hit him and he wants to hit you back right away. He
1,000%.
and he's not gonna just go easily like a Berlanga. He's not just gonna fucking run away like William Skull and like make it a weird fucking like flitty fucking type of shit. Crawford is not gonna do that. I'm not saying he's gonna fucking go all out warrior and get knocked the fuck out rather than lose a decision, but I don't think that he's going to just fucking go quietly if he is gonna go.
Oh,
So
absolutely. No, I mean, think about, for example, when he fought Sean Porter. That was a tough fight because Porter was the one dude out of the PBC group who will go down as being remembered for fighting everybody, in fact, because he did. He was one of those guys, and even though a lot of the from this era, everyone's about like, you gotta pay me, you gotta pay me. Porter is one of the few of them that's like, I'll just fight you. I don't give a fuck. And you got to give him credit for that. And
wait, did he
when
fight Usyk in the amateurs?
he did,
He fought
yeah,
Usyk in the amateurs, I think.
and beat him actually, in fact, yeah.
I mean, if we're, you know, just to kind of give you a little more evidence there, a little
Yeah,
boost.
he beat Usyk in the amateurs. I wish there was footage of that. But he was giving, Crawford a hell of a fight there. Now, whether he was ahead on the scorecards or not, I don't think he was, but they told Crawford that, remember, in like round 10 or so. They were like, yo,
Oh, he's
what?
up?
Yeah, and Crawford was like, what, he's up? And they're like, yo, they're like, oh man, blah, blah, blah. And Crawford seems mad. They're like, Bud, pay attention because he's like, you can tell his mind is
Yeah.
just
Like all of a sudden it's like that meme with all the fucking like, you know, math fucking equations
exactly,
going through his
yeah,
head and
yeah,
he's just
yeah.
like,
Like everything's
okay,
just going there. He was
all
like,
right, let's do this then. And he
and then he
did.
came out there and knocked him out in the very next round, like nastily. I mean, like Porter wasn't laid out, but like he came there and just dominated and finished him.
He put a
Um,
whooping on him in that last round. Yeah, he was just like, all right, if I gotta fucking do it, let's do it right now.
yeah,
And that's
and
that's the kind of fucking thing that separates them, you know, forgive the expression, the men from the boys.
1,000%. And then you have also what he was doing, to other guys that not that because they hit him in the ring or they did something that was gonna be like, oh shit, yeah, I got to get my get back, but just like shit talking outside the ring. Like he had, he's in, like you said, spitefulness with like Hank Lundy. Well, Hank Lundy was one of those guys for that, like, he was never like a top guy, but he was always like a contender. But a big shit talker. He's always had a big mouth. And before his fight with Crawford was running his mouth a lot. And when Crawford came in, they ran a chip on his shoulder, beat him up, and then ran into his face immediately after and started, all that shit like he does after he stopped him. So, I mean, I don't get the sense that him and Canelo have that type of beef. Yeah, they had that stupid shove at one of the press conferences where you saw Rick Reno in the middle of it, holding the belt, looking at both of them kind of warily with up behind his sunglasses while it happened. But like other than that, I mean, it was nothing. I don't really get the sense that these guys hate each other. I mean, they definitely don't. I don't think they're best friends out of the ring, but like
Crawford
it
seemed
was
annoyed by Jeff Horn too, because was a big mouth, and he
okay.
kind of seemed like he took pleasure in like beating the shit out of him.
Sure. And also too, because Horn took his Pacquiao fight. Probably, you
Well,
know.
if they even would have fucking given it to him,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
yeah,
So
he made it impossible.
it's just one of those. I think that Crawford, if the layoffs don't affect him, because I mean, fighting once a year since 2019 is just crazy as a top level guy. That's Floyd level at this point, you know?
Well, and also, I guess I will say, even though I'm sticking with what I said, and I do think that Terence Crawford has a really good chance to pull this out and just might, I do think that no finger pointing because I don't know who is to blame. Maybe it's him, but the momentum from that Errol Spence win was super fucking wasted, bro.
Yeah, agreed.
That was
Made
a massive fight, a massive win. A lot went into that promotion. It really seemed like a true 50-50 fight going in.
people had
And
full on meltdowns after the fight on Twitter.
Crawford beat the shit out of Errol Spence. I was super unappreciative of the fact that leading into the fight, I tried to point out the car accident thing, and pretty much everybody PBC related was like, fuck you for even bringing that up. And then afterwards, they're like, he had the car accident. And I'm like, fuck you guys. I'm not even hearing that. I'm pretending that Terence Crawford dominated the best possible version of Errol Spence because that's what the fuck you said. And he beat the shit out of him to the point where people are like quitting the fucking internet, bro.
Yeah.
So, well, and on top of that, I think what was it, the weekend before Steph Fulton got his ass kicked too by anyway. So that was like,
Oh, that was a bad, yeah, that was a
it
bad
was
week.
a chain of events that sent people into a fucking death spiral. But regardless, that being said, that momentum was really fucking wasted, truly. And that's not to say that Madrimov was not and is not a good fighter because he is. Just to kind of briefly go off of what you were saying about Madrimov, 10-0, yeah, but the dude was one of those guys who had like countless fucking amateur fights and a shitload of amateur experience. And so it wasn't like he was coming in with only 10 fights of experience. A fucking very, very good fighter. Still, wasted momentum, man. And I wish that we had gotten to see more of Terence Crawford in the last 5 to 7 years. Frankly, I wish we'd just gotten to see more, him fight more. That's really all it comes down to. But guess also the flip side is he's maybe a little bit fresher, possibly has taken less damage, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't know. I'm looking forward to a good fight. I hope that it's a competitive fight. If it's not, I'll be sad.
Absolutely, man. I think we're going to be in for a good fight. I don't think it's going to be fight of the year material because it's just not in their styles. Canelo, the last, compelling fights he's really been in were, I mean, besides him losing to,
I got a
to,
question for you real quick, bro.
sure,
How many Canelo fights have you counted, you think?
good call. Let
I
me,
mean, you don't necessarily have to count them up, but just like estimate. Like 10?
yeah, probably around there. If you're also counting, Punch Zone, when I used to do that for
Oh,
18,
yeah.
then yeah, definitely around a dozen or so for sure.
I mean, I didn't mean to cut off your train of thought.
I don't know.
But I mean, I guess we could just say that you probably have a perhaps even better viewpoint of, I would imagine counting Canelo, at least counting him in the fight is probably super fucking easy because he just doesn't throw that many punches.
Yeah, and also like I said, earlier when I mentioned his opponents kind of get like stymied by him. He has the style that even though he doesn't do a lot, like he does put countless pressure on you and he keeps on stalking you and he does know how to cut off the ring, even though he didn't show it in his last fight. And it's tough, it's tough to like kind of and plus also too, we haven't even really talked about like his defensive capabilities. I mean, the guy is brilliant defensively.
This is true.
they everyone loves to show the footage against Floyd Mayweather talking about, oh, look how Floyd schooled him, and Floyd landing those counters over the right hand, over the gloves of Canelo with the overhand rights and the straight rights and the hooks and all this other shit. And yeah, that was a brilliant performance, but at the same time, Canelo was really young. I mean, I'm not gonna say that like he wasn't fully ready. Like he fought like guys like Trout and other ones before that, and a lot of people thought he was gonna win that fight. But he got countless, and he got clearly has gotten a lot better than that too, even defensively better. Like it wasn't as straight up. Like his head movement is like really brilliant now, and just look at the guys that he fought that he just makes them miss over and over. Like guys like Danny Jacobs, who people would probably think before their fight that he was more of a classic boxer than Canelo, and Canelo just made him look, bad in that one. The way he was like ducking his jabs and doing all this other stuff, like brilliant head movement. And it's a combination of all of that where you just kind of like get overwhelmed. I mean, Kovalev, for example, was doing really well early on, even though Kovalev was a spent bullet. His height and his jab were
Yeah,
keeping him in
his
the fight.
jab was really giving him trouble.
Yeah, because Kovalev also just had a fucking. That's another guy that worked countless fights in his ringside, and his power is so thudding, and that shotgun jab he had, where he was just douche, 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 douche. It wasn't connecting over and over on Alvarez, but at the same time, it was just keeping him away. Until he finally, again, that pressure that Alvarez kept on putting on him and landing, the a pot shot here, there, instead of catching up. And I think what Kovalev probably only had about 2 months actually to train for that fight because he had like a really taxing one before that, and then he was just knocked unconscious. But it's it's tough, man. Alvarez puts on a lot of pressure on you, and then in turn takes guys who don't usually throw a lot of punches and turns them into nothing. So yeah, a lot of his fights just kind of become like easy to count.
I would imagine, dude, because he just doesn't throw a lot of punches, and it's almost like you said he lulls the opponents into like, he'll throw a counter or whatever for that's loaded up, and he'll throw it from like 17 feet away, but then he gets the opponents into this phase where they're just like and they like
Yeah.
cover up, and instead of like moving or something, it's crazy. But I mean, there's some skill in him doing that too. He makes it happen.
I mean, yeah, and when he said when he moved up to super middleweight and he started beating up guys like Callum Smith, who had won the second World Series Super, so whatever the fuck that shit was called.
I thought
And
he was gonna give Canelo trouble, dude. I was sure he was gonna.
I think everybody did. I mean, Smith was on a roll at that point. He had knocked out George Groves and countless other guys and looked very impressive in doing so. And the fact that Canelo had beat the crap out of his brother, you would think that would make him, get more like, oh, I'm gonna get revenge for him or whatever, right? Because isn't Liam Smith his brother? Callum, like the Fighting Smith
I think
brothers.
so. Yeah, I'm pretty sure they're in the Smith family.
So yeah, Canelo beat up Liam a few years before that, and then Callum, who like we said was 27-0, and then Canelo just broke his shoulder practically with jabs to it, and just beat him down. And then when Billy Joe Saunders, that was another one, a super mover that was running around, a jackrabbit type shit, and Canelo just landed one uppercut to his face that just changed his career because he hasn't fought since then. It's like, yeah, he knows how to chase these guys down, but I'm just wondering, these were all again, this was like 2020, like you mentioned, when he was whooping on everyone. 2020, 2021, that was the plant fight. And then like you said, Bivol comes in 2022, and since then it's been kind of like autopilot a little bit. And yeah, he can't have that for Crawford.
Nah, that kind of thing is not. At least I don't think is going to work. But like I said, it might hinge on how big Crawford plans on coming in and how much he's lost or whatever. But I don't know. Hopefully, it's a good fight. But on the heels of talking about Canelo Crawford, got to talk some history. I mean, it's just kind of like the way of the world, dude. We can't fucking get away from it. You know what I'm saying? So we wanted to briefly talk about a handful of fighters who also made an attempt of, I guess not necessarily jumping from 154 to 168 per se, but fighters who had success
Yeah.
at 154 also tried their hand all the way at 168. So, in any case, who we got, dude? Who are
I
these
mean,
brave souls who tried to go from junior middleweight to super, the super version of the junior middleweight?
so there's only been four guys in history, as far as I know, Actually, and as far as I know, it rings true. There's only been four guys in history that have won titles at 154 and then won a championship at 168. And it's three of them, well, I mean, two of them are all-time greats. The third one is Canelo currently, and he's on his way to being an all-time great when he retires. We'll see how people feel about him in 10, 15 years from now. And the fourth guy, though, and I asked you about this beforehand too, and it's definitely tricky because no one, I guarantee you, no one that lit like, even if you're a hardcore fan, you'd have to think about this one because it's not a name that you would think off the top of your head that'd be like, oh yeah, you know what I mean? Like it takes a minute. But it was none other than this stud right here. I have a shirt of him, so I'm pulling it up. Schoolboy Darren Van Horn is the oldest, the
Feeling hot, hot, hot.
yes, extremely. You said that right there. Hot, hot, hot. My man was the king back in the day. And this is actually one of the first shirts I ever bought and started my obsession with vintage boxing shirts. I remember seeing this on eBay and I was like, I need to have this. It just looks so fucking cool. This was over a decade ago. I've never seen another one since either. But anyways, yeah, Darren Van Horn is the fourth guy. And I mean, I'll talk about him briefly because I don't think we've ever really talked about him on the show before. But Darren Van Horn was from Louisville, Kentucky, and got publicity early on because, I hate to bring race into anything, but I mean, being a white dude coming up from Kentucky and a college, going to college and all that, being really good looking, being young, and knowing how to box, well, that's going to get you popularity. That's going to get you television. And so yeah, he was featured pretty early on. And then he was also promoted too by my old boss, Cedric Kushner, because Van Horn was an IBF champion and Cedric had a monopoly on the IBF in the late 80s and early 90s. Like he really did. To the point where when I was helping clean his old office out, I found a bunch of plaques. And he had won IBF Promoter of the Year from like 1988 to like 1993, just like a clean sweep every year. Because he was paying Bob Lee more than any other promoter, I guess, for
Yeah, he was
for-
getting ladies of the night with Bob Lee or some
yeah, and
shit.
all that shit. Lee even used to say it too. He was like, yo, he was like, the fat man pay up when they had those remember the cameras in like the secret interviews they were showing and they had like Doug Beavers or whoever was coming in there with a strap on his well, like duct tape on his wrist filled with dollar bill. I don't even know how he put it on his ankle either, but he would come in there and like, take the tape off of his bills and like throw it on the table. And he was like, yeah, this is from the big man. Oh, Cedric paid up? Okay, good. Well, anyways, Van Horn won the IBF Junior Middleweight Championship when he defeated I'm not even bringing up his record here. Robert Bam Bam Hines. It was Robert Hines. Now, Robert Hines was from Philadelphia, had beaten was it Matthew Hilton? It wasn't Davey Hilton. He had beaten Matthew Hilton initially for the IBF championship in a big upset and in a really, really good fight. So Bam Bam Hines, being from Philly, upsetting one of the top champion, young champions in the boxing at the time, had some momentum going. And he wasn't expected to lose to Darren Van Horn, but Van Horn, who could box his ass off, even though he just looked like Archie, um, scored an upset. He lost it immediately, I think, to Gianfranco Rossi. But after he lost to Rossi, who, yeah, I don't even want to talk about him.
Basically just kidnapped the title, took it to Italy, and then like was like, I'm gonna defend it 9 billion times.
And now somehow he's on the Hall of Fame ballot along with Sven Ottke. Actually, that's coming up pretty soon, man. Can't wait to get that ballot. But
Cool.
so he the fuck is happening now? Okay, so back to Van Horn. He moves up to super middleweight. And he fights Lindell Holmes at this time. Now, Lindell Holmes had been a longtime contender, middleweight and super middleweight for a number of years from the mid 80s and all that. And was a good fighter too. It was just like a stacked era. But Holmes had become IBF super middleweight champion. And then when he fought Van Horn scored a nasty knockout actually of him, like round 11 or so. And it was a big upset and, became super middleweight champ himself. So yeah, he's the last guy, the last piece of the puzzle. But I don't think he made a defense of that one either though, because I think his first defense ended up being against Iran Barkley. And you know, I love Darren Van Horn. He's a good fighter, really plucky, but that fight was so bad and kind of makes a case for being on that VHS tape, Faces of Death. Remember that tape? Like that's how vicious it was. Van Horn got the fucking shit knocked out of him all around the ring, man. Barkley was snarling and mean, and this was like post Duran, where like a year or two, he was just in these wild knockdown brawls. Like remember the first round knockout brawl he had with Nigel Benn, and you know he had other wild brawls during the time. But yeah, when he fought Van Horn, that was nasty.
Unfortunately, he also would have had to fight his ass off to be the greatest fighter from either Cincinnati or wherever he moved from, Kentucky, Louisiana. He's got some stiff competition. But regardless, dude was on the cover of KO. He's on the cover of Ring.
He was.
He had a Gray, of course, would love this kid, but he was on one of the 1991 KO cards. I mean, that's not to say, oh, he made it, he was mainstream, but the point being that he was hot for a minute, dude. He really was. He was considered a relatively popular contender, an appealing, fighter to look at who could potentially be a crossover star. That type of guy. The problem was the talent level just wasn't quite there. He wasn't a bad fighter whatsoever, but he wasn't on that level. He didn't quite have the superstar capabilities like a lot of other fighters before him and since him have had. But still, um, you know, winning titles at 154 and 168,
Yeah.
that's nothing to shake a stick at. However, you also, I guess, have to consider that if you had said that to a trainer who was like from like the 40s or 50s or something like that, they'd say, so fucking what? Those aren't
Yeah.
even real divisions. Like,
True.
and there also, I guess, is something to say for the fact that they are fucking new divisions comparatively. And
Comparative.
also
Yeah.
and also if we talk about the two other all-time greats, Ray Leonard and Thomas Hearns, who are on that list, they basically helped like inaugurate the fucking division themselves. So it's almost like not very fair because they were like in a race to fucking, pick up titles and stuff like that. But still, it's still a short list.
It's and so like Van Horn actually I didn't even realize this after he lost to Barkley. There was his I mean from what I heard he had like a rocky relationship with his dad, one of those that like he was pushed really young into it with a very, you know, as a lot of people have like bad rocky relationships with their dad when as professionals because their dad is just always hunching them and always just overbearing and over this and over that, overtraining you and vicariously living their lives through their kids and all that other stupid shit. But at one point, he was scheduled to fight James Toney after Tony had beaten up Barkley for the IBF super middleweight title and probably wasn't going to end up too well for him, but he ended up pulling out of that fight. And then eventually, soon after that, he was scheduled to fight Nigel Benn for the WBC belt and also subsequently pulled out of that one too and then just quietly retired.
Yeah, I mean, like it kind of like just faded away more than anything, unfortunately. I saw that there were a couple of interviews with him and like from like the last few years, so at least it sounds like he's doing okay, thank goodness.
He
But
never made a comeback or anything. He got out
yeah,
young, so yeah.
in terms of his boxing career, he kind of just, at least as a fighter, he just kind of faded away. I think that he had worked in some gyms since then, but anyway, it's a good bit of trivia though.
Yeah, totally. And I was gonna say Crawford would be the latest one to become champ, but I just realized his fight with Madrimov was for an interim title, and I don't count those.
Yeah, I don't know if I don't know how that all figures. That complicates the entire.
I mean, absolutely, because I was looking at it earlier when I was thinking about it for the show, and I was even gonna tweet it, and I'm like, you know something, Crawford was interim. I'm not gonna post an interim champ because then again, you'd have to post Anthony Mundine because Mundine actually is an interesting case. Well, not because not to say that he would be rated in this discussion, but like Mundine was a super middleweight champion, right? Because he started as super middleweight. He fought Svanotki in his 10th pro fight, in fact, which is crazy. And because it wasn't like he had a stellar amateur career. He was a rugby player. He only had like a
Yeah,
handful of amateur fights. And
yeah, he like fell into boxing.
yeah. And after like 10 pro fights, he fights Otki, gives him hell, surprisingly. And then Otki scores one of his very random, once every leap year knockouts. Because I
Such
think,
a weird one too.
yeah, yeah. Because
I don't even know if you could find a clean copy of it online because for years it's been like yanked as soon as that shit goes up. I don't know why, but like
probably by Mundine. I mean,
It's a really strange, like,
who
it's
wants to
not,
say they got slept? And I mean, absolutely slept by a
yeah,
guy
by a
who only
dude
had
with
like four
zero
knockouts.
power. And then it's like if you watch it, and again, you might have to go look for it, but it's like a punch lands, but it's a super soft punch, but somehow Mundine's head goes against his own shoulder. Like it's like one of those
Yeah.
where like his head gets like knocked to the side, and then he just like falls limp, and it's like for a bit, a lot of people were like fix, fix, and I was like, I don't think that's a fix. I think that just
Just a
landed like
freak accident. Yeah.
1 in a billion, fucking weird. I don't know.
But
Anyway,
he eventually became a super middleweight champion. He beat Antoine Eccles, I think, for a vacant title. And eventually,
sounds about right.
after losing that belt, to I don't even remember who, but he loses it. He moved down in weight. He didn't stay
Kessler,
there.
maybe.
No, he fought Kessler afterwards. He lost to
Was it like
Manny
Bayer?
Siaka. Manny Siaka. Remember
Okay.
that name?
And
After
then
the
and then Marcus Bayer came into the fucking, yeah, okay.
Yes, like Manny Siaka from Puerto Rico, who I don't remember anything about him, but I think he lost surprisingly to him. But Mundine moved down in weight after that. You remember that? Like he moved down because he was trying to get a Floyd Mayweather fight. Like he went to middleweight and then eventually he went to junior middleweight and like
Yeah.
started competing around there and then won an interim title at junior middleweight. And at one point became mandatory challenger to Floyd. So like you know.
Very strange fellow. And I don't know if you remember this shit, but do you remember he got in trouble right after
Oh,
9/11?
yeah,
Or
yeah,
you
yeah, yeah,
remember that
yeah.
shit?
Because I was looking up stuff about his career today too. Like remember trying to.
Which is now like the mildest fucking shit you could possibly say, where he's basically like, well, the US kind of brought it on itself, which is kind of like what like the vast majority of people just acknowledge at this
Yeah.
fucking point. But at the time, people were like, fuck you, go to
Oh
hell.
yeah, that was a big one. They were calling him like a terrorist and all this other
I
stuff.
remember that shit.
Yeah, that was a country. Those, I mean, he said that like right after it too.
Yeah, it was really bad timing, is what it was.
that was like horrible
People
time.
were all fucking USA, USA. It was
I
bad
mean,
time.
it was bad. Yeah, you still
It's like the
even to this
weirdest
day you say
fucking
that to the
year of my
wrong
life.
people and they're just like, hmm?
So it was like the weirdest fucking year of like my life.
All of us, man, for that matter. That was a strange time. I just remember being like hyped for Hopkins Trinidad because I was supposed to be that weekend, wasn't it initially?
It was, yeah, I don't know if it was supposed to be that. No, yeah, it couldn't have been that day because it was like a Tuesday or
No, I
some
know. It's
shit
supposed
that
to
it
be that
happened.
Saturday on
Yeah,
one
so
side.
it was that Saturday. It was like the 14th or 15th or some shit. And then it like, yeah, they were like, no.
They
But
postponed it like a week or two. Well, like 2 weeks.
yeah, somehow put it
Yeah.
on 2.5 weeks later, which when you think about it, is pretty fucking wild.
Yeah. Tito
Anyway,
went back to Puerto Rico. No, Tito stood in New York, I think. I think Hopkins just went back to Philly because he only had to take a bus, train.
yeah, yeah. And then
But
that's afterwards that's what they were like, oh, we were forced to stay in New York. That's why we lost.
yeah, Mundine went down to junior middleweight, but that's a different case of a guy going from super middleweight and then going back down from there. But Mundine was never really a big guy either. Like even when he fought the super washed version of Mosley. I think I watched that early morning on ESPN 8 or something. One of those random ESPN channels that they were airing it on. And what was that? Like Mosley threw his back out in that fight. Poor guy.
God, dude.
Um, but yeah, that was I just wanted to bring that up because I thought that would be an interesting one.
Yeah, Mundine's dad is still I don't know if I would say a hero, but I would say respected in Australian boxing history.
He's still alive, Tony Mundine?
To my knowledge,
Okay.
Mundine himself, not so much. I think that they view
Yeah.
him more as like an annoyance than anything because he's just a
But
loudmouth kind of a jerk.
Mundine's dad was a hell of a fighter himself. He just couldn't take the
Mhm.
best punch.
Well, and it had the unfortunate, distinction of coming around during the time of fucking Carlos Monzon too.
Exactly, yeah. Oh,
Yeah,
well.
can't do anything about that shit. But yeah, that's there probably aren't going to be too many fighters that especially successfully drop down in weight because there's a whole lot of instances that we can come up with. Chris Bird probably being one of the best fucking
Oof.
ones where like, drops down in weight and we're just like, disaster. Don't ever
Roy
do that
Jones.
again. Yeah, Roy Jones dropping back down from heavyweight. There
Well,
aren't too many that are successful.
even the guy that we can I guess mention next really briefly. We don't have to go over his whole career, but like Sugar Ray Leonard. Because Leonard, welterweight become welterweight champ, takes a pulls the shit that only few fighters in history have really tried to do is that during as an interim fight, move up and win a title there and then move back down. Very rarely does that happen, but Leonard did
Yeah,
it.
for some juice at the negotiating table and just to
Exactly.
fucking say you could.
Whitaker did it when he moved up to fight Julio Cesar Vasquez.
Yep.
And I think he realized quickly he was like, I don't want to stay at this division and went back down because Vasquez was just a fucking bruiser who,
Yeah, he was just like, I think we're good. Yeah, I think
yeah. Like Whitaker won that fight comprehensively, but Vasquez dropped him and was just like, I'm, chasing him around in the ring and Floyd and Whitaker was just like, yeah, fuck all this. And then but Leonard, junior middleweight, and then obviously takes the hiatus. So as we mentioned, being the fucking vindictive, salty asshole he was, retires, comes back, beats Hagler, and retires again. And this is when, when it becomes at this point, okay, so he retires again. We're not really sure what he's going to be doing. Uh, was he going to fight Hearns again? Is he going to fight this one? Is he going to fight Hagler? That was the main one. Everyone was wondering if he was going to fight Hagler in a rematch, and even Hagler was kind of waiting for it. And then out of the blue, Leonard decides in early like 1988 or so that he's going to fight Donnie Lalonde. And Donnie Lalonde was the WBC light heavyweight champion. So the super middleweight division at this time was like still in its infancy at this point, basically, right? I mean, like, and so what the super middleweight division started in 1984. I want to say, yeah, around 1984. So when the first champion was Butterbean's trainer, the former light heavyweight contender Murray Sutherland, and then I think and actually too, I want to say the IBF was the first ones that made a title in that division, weren't they? That sounds about, I don't know, but Murray
yeah.
Sutherland the IBF was the first one, right, to make a super
Yeah.
middleweight division. Okay, so yeah,
Well,
for a
and
while,
and
go
just
ahead.
to kind of like add a slight bit of context too, the IBF was kind of like struggling for
Recognition.
recognition because they were a fairly new organization. What were they, the ISBA or something?
USBA International.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. USBAI, that's right.
Yeah,
And
so fucking
then
stupid.
yeah,
U.S. Boxing Association International. What?
and then they changed to the IBF
Yeah.
and basically got a massive boost from Larry Holmes, basically saying like, okay, these other alphabet organizations are fucking with me, so all right, well then I'll grab your belt. And then this, I think that they're in their struggle for legitimacy and recognition. They also opened their doors to like, okay, well, what about a 168-pound division? And that's exactly what happened.
So the initial champion was Murray Sutherland, then it went to Chong Pal Park, and then, it kind of went on from there. The WBA soon joined, and correct me if I'm wrong, when Leonard decided that he was going to challenge WBC champion Donnie Lalonde, that's when WBC got involved and made their inaugural belt as well, correct?
Yep.
Okay. So
Yeah.
for a few years, the IBF was the only one going along with that, while the WBC and WBA were like, fuck you, I'm not doing that stupid division.
Yeah, the WBA, the WBA got in on it because Park Chung Pao fucking won the IBF title, and then the WBA for whatever reason got in on it, and he captured that belt, and then vacated and blah blah blah, and the WBC was just like, well, if they're gonna, we're gonna too, and then on top of that, with the opportunity with Leonard, well,
Sure. Yeah. And that was the one of the first times. I mean, I'm sure I know, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, it's happened earlier in history where like Barney Ross fight or something like that was for like a junior welterweight and lightweight championship. Trying to technically,
it actually happened a number of times. I mean, and there's also a handful of fights where it's not listed on BoxRec, but if
yeah,
you look at the weights, they were both technically on the line. But yeah, it was Tony Canzaneri did it a few times,
yep,
Barney Ross, um, I think Kid Chocolate might have done it once or twice with the featherweight and the junior lightweight. Anyway, yeah, but it was a long time.
yeah,
So I mean,
yeah,
like, if you can pluck those singular fucking instances out of your memory, that means that it doesn't happen a lot.
sure. And but in modern times, this was like the first time when the WBC was like, oh, well, we'll make you inaugural super middleweight champion and have the WBC light heavyweight title on the line. But Lalonde had to come in at 168 for the fight, didn't he?
Yeah, exactly. Because you have to weigh in under the super middleweight limit.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so
So,
basically, at light heavyweight, they were kind of just like, all right, well, then we'll technically allow you to fight for the light heavyweight title, even though you're not within the range or whatever, which, basically just for the for the notoriety, for the money, etc. I mean, there's no other reason. So,
but Leonard, after he stopped Lalonde, which was a very exciting fight, I mean, kind of showed that Leonard was a little washed at that point too. But I mean, Lalonde could punch. He was young, he was dangerous, and a lot bigger than Leonard, even though he was weight drained. And you have to think if he wasn't fully drained and was able to fight at 175, how it could have turned out. You know what I mean? Like Leonard had to struggle in that one.
yeah.
Um, Also notable, in fact, because that was the show that was promoted by Vince McMahon in Titan Sports at the time. So there were like vignettes before the fight with like Gorilla Monsoon and Bobby Heenan, which is hilarious to see a crossover with that in boxing was true. Like Gorilla Monsoon and Bobby Heenan at the casino, I want to say, because the fight took place in Atlantic City, right? Or maybe I don't know where it took place. Um,
Sounds about right.
Caesars. And but they were in the casino and you know, Gorilla was like talking about it like he talks up wrestling things. Lennon and Lalonde, it's gonna be a happening. I'm telling you right now, blah blah blah. Bobby Heenan being the heel, talking shit about Leonard, and all of a sudden Leonard shows up. He's giving Heenan trouble. He's giving Heenan attitude, and Heenan's kind of like jawing back and forth. Gorilla's going with him. It's funny. It's cool stuff. It's on YouTube. But Leonard ends up stopping him, and unlike other times, like where he became junior middleweight champion, vacated it immediately, became middleweight champion, vacated it immediately. Leonard didn't vacate it immediately for this one, but it wasn't like he went on and fought new challengers around. It wasn't like he was looking for like Lyndall Holmes or this guy or that one and be like, yeah, Michael Nunn or,
Yeah, exactly.
Iran Barkley, like these guys that are Nigel Benn, these type of dudes. Instead, he went back to his old friends, Roberto Duran and Thomas Hearns. And the Hearns rematch, he definitely should have lost. There was no reason. I mean, even Leonard admits that now, and Leonard has the biggest ego ever, but he'll tell people that like Hearns beat him that second fight. And the Duran fight, well, that fight was just a fucking fiasco.
Yeah, Duran just looked like, I mean, by that point, he had just started losing, just losing it, basically.
Yeah,
But
and but people were excited initially because he had beaten Barkley and looked so inspiring doing that. But that whole promotion. I don't recommend. I mean, if you listen to the show, you've clearly seen the fight, but like, I don't recommend anyone who's never seen it to watch it because that fight sucked. And the story behind it's hilarious too because as there always is, there's always one guy that's gonna be a new promoter coming on the scene, and because he thinks he has money, he can just flaunt it around and take over boxing. And I want to say this one was Steve Wynn, who owned fuck. I
well,
forgot the hmm?
he's like a hotel magnate. So
Yeah.
he's like owned, like several hotels and shit.
And I forgot the hotel that they were opening, but he specifically bidded like crazy amounts of money for this fight to end up at that hotel so he could like open it and all that. And it was bad. Like the fight was in Vegas at the what was it, like during the winter time. Both guys were cold. Duran didn't do much except somehow he did cut Leonard over both of his eyes, and like Leonard had to go to the hospital and get like 50 stitches. One was from a punch, the other one I think was from like a headbutt or some shit. Like it was bad. It was just an absolute disaster. But Leonard did make, to say that though, Leonard did make a couple of defenses of that belt. But but to also draw back on what we said about Mundine going down in weight, when Leonard did come back in 1991, when he to fight Terry Norris, that was at 154. And Leonard had not been at 154 since what, fucking 1981, practically. So 82. That was an interesting move on his end. And I mean, clearly he was never like a super middleweight, but to go back down to 154, fight a guy like Norris was just a disaster waiting to happen, which it clearly was. So.
Yeah, no shit, dude. Which is why I think that the fact that he kind of picked and chose his way through, you have to give a little bit more credit to Hearns because he was not picking and choosing the same way.
Yeah.
I mean, he did because he was a star, but not nearly as much. He wasn't as picky about who he was fighting, and he was actually fighting a number of the younger contenders.
1,000%. And also for Hearns, he had the body size to be able to naturally acclimate himself to these different weights without like, while still being bigger than these guys too. For instance. Hearns, um, obviously starts out as welterweight. He moves up, beats Benitez at junior middleweight, loses to Hagler. Um, yeah, loses to Hagler initially at 160. Now, does he fight Rolled On immediately after that, or did he go up to fight Andres at 175 and then come back?
Andres.
He fought Andres first and then
Yeah.
came back down? Okay.
Yeah.
And think about that. Like, he went up to fight the 175, beat Andres, who at the time was just an out and out slugger, would get better under the tutelage of Emmanuel Stewart, but was a natural 175, pounder, a guy that was heavily muscled and solid all around guy. And Hearns, just with his frame, was able to handle that type of weight, you know what I mean? And dominate a guy like Andres, drop him multiple times, and then go back down to 160. And people forget, though, that Hearns was a champion at super middleweight because it wasn't like he won a major title, at least when the three major ones were around back then. He won the fledgling WBO belt. He beat Michael Olajide for it, for the vacant title. I think the inaugural WBO title too, like in, I don't know, what year was that, 1989 or some
It
so.
was the Kenshin fight.
It was Kenshin fight for super middleweight?
Mhm.
Oh, okay, okay. That's it. So yeah, he fights Kenshin and
Because sorry to interrupt you, but because Leonard had the WBC, and then so that was the whole thing was they wanted to make it because it was he won the WBO, so they wanted to make it a unification fight.
okay, okay. I get you. And he almost lost that fight to Kenshin too. Like he almost lost that fight bad. Kenshin put a whooping on him in that
Yeah,
fight.
it's one of those fights where unfortunately Hearns also showed that he recovered okay, he just didn't take the greatest punch.
Yeah, and that was the fight first removed from the first Barkley fight where he got flattened. And so people, I mean, they actually showed the Kenshin fight for a while. They were showing it on Top Rank Tubi. They haven't showed it in a while, but they were showing it for a little bit. And like, there was a lot of, worry about, well, there was a lot of questions. Oh, he's coming back. How's he going to look? Um, it was 5 months after the Barkley fight, and he looked like he was shot. That's why everyone thought Leonard was going to blow him away in 1989. He looked bad in that fight. Kenshin, who had already lost a few times to guys like Juan Roldan, he lost a decision to James Schuler. He was a contender, but he was a guy that usually lost when he made it to the very top, and was supposed to do the same to Hearns. But like he dropped Hearns heavily in one of the rounds. I forgot what round it was, but he dropped the shit out of Hearns. Actually, I have it up right here. Fourth round. Yeah. It was in the fourth round, and Mills Lane was the referee, and that creates one of the funniest visuals afterwards because Hearns clutches onto Kinchin and refuses to let go. Just puts on a vice grip on him, and little Mills is trying to get between both of them. You hear him screaming, "Let him go! Let him go! Hey, get the fuck off!" And he's like visibly trying his hardest to elbow Hearns off and like pull him off, and he can't. And in a scene you wouldn't see until almost a decade later when Lewis fought Henry Akinwande, and you just see like Mills getting exasperated, trying to pull Hearns off and almost falling himself, and that's when he deducts the point. He's like, "Fuck this! 1 point, there." Poor Mills, but he was always in some shit. It was just like, um,
Tommy fucking got that veteran shit to pull him through.
well, at that point, because he didn't use it in the first Leonard fight. Remember, that was the first thing everybody always said is that he didn't know how
Yep.
to clinch back then. That's why he lost in the first Leonard fight. He never needed to know how to clinch back then, in fact. But yeah, okay, so I take that back. He the Kinchin fight, then you were right. Leonard for the unification, WBA, WBC, and WBO. And then he fought Olajide in 1990, just defended the WBO belt. So yeah.
Yeah, and he should have won obviously the WBC belt.
Yeah.
I mean, like it wasn't a straight up ass kicking that he gave Leonard, but he should have won that fight without. He got hurt too during
Oh,
that fight. A lot of people forget,
he was
but
almost out in the last round.
yeah, he got hurt pretty badly too. But he dropped Leonard and then had Leonard in pretty deep trouble and should have won more rounds. But closer fight than a lot of people remember. That being said, actually, dude, that later career victory against Virgil Hill, dude, and against an undefeated Virgil Hill too. Bro, that's a very meaningful victory that a lot of people probably discount on fucking Hearn's resume, bro. Virgil Hill was a very, very good light heavyweight. It just so happened that he operated in a not very good division.
Yeah. You're absolutely right. You know, that's a underrated win for Hearns because it's rarely brought up today. Totally correct. You know, everyone will always bring up Cuevas or, you know, his fights with the Four Kings and all this other shit, but the Hill win is extremely underrated. Hill was fuck, what was his record at that time? Oh, he was 30-0, but he was also champion since like 1987 and silver medalist at the 84 Olympics. And overall, hell, like a very in a tough style too, man. Like kind of a mover with an extremely good jab, like one of the best jabs in boxing at the time. And Hearns not only out jabbed him, which was pretty incredible, out jabbed him, out boxed him, out everything. You know, Hill couldn't do much with it. It was not a close fight, but like a close enough fight. But
Yeah,
Hearns,
it was competitive.
yeah, but Hearns definitely won it, and he won it like very impressively by outboxing him, and he did it again at light heavyweight against a young champion and a decade removed from like from the first Leonard fight. You know what I mean? When all the other four kings now, Duran was still around, but I mean he was like squandering. Leonard was gone at this point. Hagler had been gone since '87. You know, and here's Hearns outboxing a young champion who would go on to become a Hall of Famer himself.
And if he had just been able to fucking hold on a little bit in the Barkley rematch, bro, I
Yeah.
have I those fights never happened. Iran is such a fucking cool dude, but those fights never fucking happened. God damn it. But
Especially in the rematch, man. Like, you know, the rematch was a fun fight, but Iran lumped him up. I can't even front. Like, it was a very close fight, extremely close. Look at the scorecards. You know, Hearns only lost by 1 point, but he was dropped. And at the end of it, he looked like the Elephant Man. He had that
yeah, bro, he was
nasty,
yeah,
nasty,
man.
swollen, and like
Uh
Barkley just was a rough dude, man. You know, and Barkley wasn't washed at this point. He was obviously motivated to fight Hearns again.
just
And
the bad style for Tommy, I guess. I don't know.
And I remember they were both on Arsenio before their rematch talking about it. And even Barkley talked circles around Hearns in that one too. Like that was 10-7. Barkley was shit talking him. Hearns couldn't come back with good comebacks, just kept on saying he's gonna knock him out and trying to be serious. Barkley's like, yeah, the way I knocked you out, and like, and all this other
I
shit.
could definitely see that, dude, because Tommy's like kind of quiet. Like he's not really
Yeah.
like a
Like he tries to talk, but he's not
yeah,
really,
he's not really like
you
a
know.
shit talker like that. He's always been kind of like soft spoken, at least
Even when he was
and
shit talking Hagler, it didn't even seem natural. It just, Hagler was
nah,
even
he
shit
just
talking
tried to
him.
look mean, basically.
Yeah.
But Iran Barkley's just like a dude's a rascal. The guy's a fucking
Absolutely.
character.
Even from the South Bronx, you think he wasn't snapping on his friends growing up? You know, shit
Yeah, no
talking
shit.
them.
That dude probably heard it all on the fucking
Yeah, so I
street.
mean, like he was really funny. He was witty. I have to look that up again because he was like running circles around Tommy on the table there, and I felt bad. I'm like, damn, Tommy, like come back, say something to this man. And but yeah, Hearns had that long career that I don't, it wasn't last as long as Duran, but I mean, who would? But you'd have to say it. Even though he never had another title fight after losing to Barkley, he had just a better late career than Duran did. Duran had bigger fights because, the fucking fights with Camacho or Paz, or that ill-fated one fight that he got with Joppy and stuff. And he had a couple of decent wins too when he beat what's his name there the former middleweight champion himself, the Argentinian guy. Jorge Jorge
Omada.
Jorge Castro.
Oh yeah, Locomotora.
Yeah, he beat Castro, which was a good win for Duran late in his career. But um, Hearns, even though, like I said, he never had another title fight, there were rumors of him always like, either fighting James Toney or fighting Roy Jones. That was always a big one. Everyone was like, oh, is he gonna fight Roy Jones one day? And, kind of luckily he didn't because at that point Roy would have tore him up. But I mean, but then there was also too that there was a lot of talk about him fighting at cruiserweight because he started fighting at cruiserweight. There was like a lot of talk of him potentially fighting either Bobby Ches. That was a big one that was being named about because Ches was a cruiserweight champion in the early 90s. And then when Ches had to give up his belt for like a car accident or some shit that happened, there was talk of Hearns eventually fighting Ancelet Wamba, who was the longtime WBC champion. And there was a lot of that fight was actually signed a few times and aborted for whatever reason. But you know, if you look back on those fights from Hearns after the second Barkley fight, they're fun to watch, you know. And I actually talked to him. The one time I met Hearns was when he got inducted at the Hall of Fame, and I was doing his fist casting, and I told him I was like, the first few fights I ever watched with my dad were fights of yours, and those were the fights where Andrew Maynard and Dan Ward, you know, like guys like that. And he was blasting them out in the first round. I remember my dad telling me all excited too when he was going to fight. Yo, man, you're about to watch Tommy Hearns. Tommy Hearns knocks everybody out in the first round. I can't believe you're going to watch this. Boom. So I don't even think he knew Hearns was on those cards, you know? And then scores the first round knockout of Maynard. He scores the first round knockout of Ward. And like, I got excited too. I was like, man, who is this guy? And when I asked Hearns about that, and Hearns was like, he just had this big smile on his face, and he was like, "Man, that was actually one of the most fun moments of my career." He said, "I had such a good time just going around and like barnstorming and fighting these guys and that one and just staying active." He was like, "That was a blast."
I'm not going to say like it's his greatest career win or even one of his best career wins or anything like that. But do you know, even on the undercard of when Nassim Hamed
Yeah,
defeated Paul Engel, dude, he on the undercard of that he defeated former cruiserweight champion Nate Miller.
that's
I
right.
mean,
It's cold rounds too.
and that's not to say that Nate Miller's like he in the pantheon of like cruiserweight champions, he's not even up there either. I'm not trying to talk it up. I'm just saying that it's not nothing either, especially considering, gosh, Hearns must have been, I don't know, what, like 42 or something like that at that point?
Find out really quick, I can tell you. Yeah. So that fight was what, 99? Yeah.
Yeah. So do some quick
And not only that,
math.
man, like that, it wasn't like, oh, he won an 8 round
Yeah.
decision, something like
Yeah.
he
So he's 41.
yeah. And 41 with a long ass career where he had been, through some fights at that point. I say that like almost like jokingly. Of course, he had been through some shit. And fighting a guy who Nate Miller was only 2 years removed from being champion after he lost to Tioso. So yeah, I mean Miller was, one of those hot and cold fighters, and he was definitely cold that night. But I mean, Hearns, to his credit, was able to outbox him in 1999 over 12 rounds to win. What was that bullshit? IBC or something?
Yeah. It was like some,
IBO.
fringe fucking whatever.
Well, even then, man, the IBO title, and
They were trying to make something of that belt for a couple of years. Like, I
there
mean,
still are. I mean, like, I think it's gone a little. I mean, people be wearing it now sometimes to show that they got 18 million belts, and it's not a bad looking belt when you look at it.
yeah, like it's like when you look and a dude's got fucking 19 belts, like, it just looks like it's one of the belts, to be
It
honest. You
does,
know what
but
I'm
they all
saying?
kind of
Like
look the same,
it
man.
just looks like a fucking belt. But like, but yeah, they've been trying to. Isn't the IBO? Isn't that the one where they do like computerized rankings? I'm pretty sure it is.
Probably, bro. I
I'm
have no
I'm I'm pretty sure it is, or at least they did. I don't know if they still do, but I'm almost positive that's the one that did. But anyway,
IBO, IBC, WBU. There,
I yeah, I
they
couldn't I
all made a
couldn't
push for it at one point or another.
I couldn't give yeah, I couldn't give less. I don't even care about the mainstream ones, much less the ones that aren't fucking mainstream. So in any case,
But
yeah, like it's
for the aforementioned guys that we said, besides Van Horn, who I think would, I don't think he'd be that competitive in this era. But well, I mean, he would be, but he certainly wouldn't be beating a Canelo or anything like that. You know what I mean? But how do you think Hearns would do in today's super middleweight era? Probably just as well, if not even better. You know what I mean?
especially if we're talking about like uh, this is a Thomas Hearns at super middleweight who is clearly past his best. And I think that if you maybe allow him to move to super middleweight a little bit earlier when he had a little bit more left, especially, his best division was clearly 154
Yeah.
from what we have to look at. His best division was clearly 154. But I don't really see too many, even at 168, he was a massive puncher. I don't see too many of the 168 pounders out there right now being able to actually outbox him clearly or being able to take his punch. And insanely biased, huge Thomas Hearns fan. So take that into account. But yeah, dude, guys, the guy was a monster.
Totally. I think Leonard too. Well, Leonard's a little bit different because I don't even know if he would have went all the way to super middleweight when
Yeah,
there's,
he would have required more of a swarming or kind of like more of all volume style. And I don't know if that suits him well. That leaves him in line to get fucking smashed by some of these bigger dudes. So I don't know about that with Leonard. I mean maybe, but regardless, I think when you look at the full picture, though, especially with rarefied air, it's only a handful of guys, and Canelo's among them. You know, I wrote recently. I haven't checked to see if it's out. It should be out in the next day or two. Basically, a career assessment
Mhm.
of where Canelo stands among the greatest Mexican fighters of all time. It's going to be some salty people about where I ranked him. I know there is because it's just there's, and especially if they put like where I ranked him in the title of the article, I'm cooked. I'm going to get fucking hunted down. But dude, you know, it's just how it is.
Yeah.
But that's its own show, like trying to figure out where Canelo's ranked. However, the fact that he's managed to do this, that's not nothing. You know, like that's a significant accomplishment. And I do think that the things that he's accomplished puts him up there with some of the greatest Mexican fighters of all time. Certainly not saying this, he's the greatest, not saying he's the top. I'm saying that he's among some of them. And some of the things that he's accomplished in the last handful of years, I think, kind of boosted that idea. And the fact that he's not liked by a lot of people and a lot of people don't like his style and stuff like that really has no bearing on that whatsoever. So, you know, Terence Crawford has a really big assignment in front of him this weekend, any way you slice it. And I think that even the fact that, even despite the fact that we're kind of like favoring him, or we think that he has a lot of attributes that really could help him win this fight, it's a big assignment, bro.
Yeah.
It's a real big chunk to bite off. And the fact that we're talking, I mean, Darren Van Horn aside, with all due respect, the fact that otherwise we're talking about some really great high quality names here says a lot.
Absolutely, man. It's rare air for you for a guy to be able to do this. And Crawford, we'll see. I mean, I believe that he has a very good chance to be able to pull this off, but it's a fascinating matchup the way you look at it. It is a matchup between two future Hall of Famers, two great fighters. We'll see where they end up on the pantheon of all-time greats, but they're on their way there. Canelo, if he wins this fight and retires tomorrow, people will still, bitch about the Benavidez fight, but his place in legacy is secure. Crawford, if he wins this fight, this elevates him even more so into like that rare era where people are going to be talking about him in the same type of breath of like Sugar Ray Leonard or other contemporaries. So that's where we're at with this one. And, I'm looking forward to it to Saturday, even though the whole card in general is kind of mush, but at least it's free.
Yeah, I can't really, I guess I don't like the card, but at the same time, it's only because I don't really know a lot of the fighters on the card. However, that's kind of just what we've come to expect out of any
Yeah.
big like pay-per-view or mainstream blockbuster card or whatever. That's how it goes.
I mean, it really
That's
does. They've done that now. Like we're at the age now where we used to be like the old timers complaining, "Who the hell are these guys on this card? I don't know they
We
motherfuckers.
are those fucking guys.
What was
We
a
are
Ricardo
those
Lopez?
fucking guys.
105 pounds of what? I eat that for breakfast."
I'm gonna have to start like dyeing my beard, dude, because now it's like too obvious. Now I'm like, I just look like a fucking old guy complaining about this shit. I'm
I
gonna have
mean,
to
bro,
dye
I'm
it.
turning 41 next month, and trust me, my shit is all salt and pepper now. It's starting to be.
We are fucked.
Yeah,
Totally
bro.
fucked.
It is what it is. But
On
I mean,
that
it's just, yeah,
on that note,
enjoy this weekend.
yeah, on that note, enjoy these other fucking guys in their fucking upper 30s fighting. Nah, man. Look, I think that you really summed it up pretty nicely. I am looking forward to it. I think it's on paper a more competitive fight than many people think, and I think that even just on the fact that we're gonna get that, we should at least get that kind of pre-fight feeling. You know what I'm saying? You know that feeling when the
Totally.
bell's about to ring and they're like looking at each other across the ring doing this shit, and you're like, all
Oh
right,
yeah,
all right,
yeah,
all right,
yeah,
all right, all
yeah,
right.
definitely.
I think we're gonna get that feeling.
And like I don't know if I'm gonna watch it at home. I'm definitely not watching it at a bar because I hate watching them at bars. I'm not big on having a million people storming around me, splashing drinks while they're trying to,
Although, bro, I used to make the jokes that people would be like, "So when's Mayweather fighting Mike Tyson?"
Yeah.
Fuck you. Fuck. God damn it.
I have a couple of waiters at my local spot who are 18 and 19. Nicest kids you can imagine. I really like them, but I told them that Tyson is gonna fight Mayweather, and their reaction, "What? No, shut the fuck up, word? That's gonna be lit." Those words exactly. That's gonna be so fucking lit, bro. Ah! And then they went on one of their streams there. Snap. I don't know, man. I know Instagram and Twitter and Facebook. I don't know anything else. Maybe they went on TikTok. I think
Physically
that's one.
killing me, actually ending my life. Fucking just what
There's
are
a
they?
million
What are we
stream things. I
doing?
had no idea what they were on, but they went on something and started yelling about it. I just little sat there and laughed. I was, I'm gonna go outside and smoke now.
I don't know what we're doing anymore. I'm just gonna enjoy the fights.
Same.
Hopefully, that's also what everybody else here who listened and watched also does. But thank you so much if you did listen in or watch. If you listen, go ahead and subscribe to the podcast, Knuckles and Gloves Boxing Podcast, please, and go ahead and leave a rating. Helpful. As far as the YouTube and all the YouTube, I'm 42. I mean, go watch the YouTube. So go ahead on there, subscribe, give us a comment or something like that. Hopefully, we'll get back to them at some time in the next few years, Eris. We'll talk soon, bro.
Have a good one.